Dr. Michael Harrison had always believed that being a surgeon meant controlling every situation with precision and authority. For 15 years, he had commanded operating rooms across Chicago's most prestigious hospitals, his reputation built on steady hands and unwavering confidence. But nothing had prepared him for the moment when his professional world and personal life would collide in the most terrifying way possible. The morning of October 15th began like any other Tuesday. Michael kissed his wife Sarah goodbye as she headed to her job at the local elementary school where she taught third grade. She had complained of feeling dizzy the night before, but Sarah was the type of person who rarely let minor ailments slow her down. At 38, she maintained the same energetic spirit that had first attracted Michael during their college years at Northwestern University. "Don't forget we have dinner with my parents tonight," Sarah reminded him, adjusting her colorful scarf that complemented her autumn dress. Her brown eyes sparkled with the same warmth that had captivated him 17 years ago. "Wouldn't miss it," Michael replied, though his mind was already shifting to the complex spinal surgery scheduled for that afternoon. "Just promise me you'll take it easy if you're still feeling off." Sarah laughed, the sound filling their kitchen with familiar comfort. "I'm fine, Dr. Harrison. Stop diagnosing your wife over breakfast." As Michael drove to Chicago General Hospital, he couldn't shake a nagging feeling of unease. Perhaps it was the way Sarah had gripped the counter briefly while pouring her coffee, or how she'd paused at the top of the stairs before coming down. In his medical training, he'd learned to trust instincts, but this felt different, personal and clouded by love rather than clinical objectivity. The hospital buzzed with its usual controlled chaos. Michael made his rounds, checking on post-operative patients and reviewing surgical notes. His colleague, Dr. Jennifer Walsh, mentioned seeing an unusual number of cardiac cases that week, but Michael's attention was divided. Between patient consultations, he found himself checking his phone for messages from Sarah, something he rarely did during work hours. At 2:30 p.m., Michael was reviewing pre-surgical imaging when his phone buzzed. Sarah's school number appeared on the screen, and his stomach immediately clenched. Schools didn't call spouses unless something was seriously wrong. "Dr. Harrison? This is Principal Martinez from Oakwood Elementary. I'm calling about your wife, Sarah. She collapsed in her classroom about 20 minutes ago. The paramedics are taking her to Chicago General right now." The words hit Michael like a physical blow. His medical training kicked in, asking the right questions about her condition and symptoms, but, internally, panic was rising like a tide. He abandoned his afternoon surgery, delegating it to Dr. Walsh, and rushed to the emergency department of his own hospital. The irony wasn't lost on him. He knew every corridor, every protocol, every staff member in this building, yet he felt completely helpless as he approached the emergency bay. The ambulance was just arriving, and Michael watched through the glass doors as paramedics wheeled in a woman on a stretcher. Even from a distance, he recognized Sarah's distinctive auburn hair spread across the white pillow. "That's my wife," he called out, his voice carrying more desperation than he'd ever heard from himself. The emergency team, led by Dr. Rodriguez, was already working efficiently around Sarah's unconscious form. Michael tried to approach, but hospital protocol and his colleagues' protective instincts kept him at a distance. "Michael, you need to let us work," Dr. Rodriguez said firmly. "I know this is impossible, but you're a family member right now, not a doctor." Sarah's face was pale, almost translucent, and various monitors were already attached to track her vital signs. The steady beeping of the heart monitor provided the only reassurance that she was still fighting. Michael watched helplessly as the medical team, people he worked with daily, treated his wife with the same professional efficiency they brought to every patient. But there was one person in that room who seemed to see something others were missing. Maria Santos had been a nurse at Chicago General for 12 years, working primarily in the emergency department. She was known for her quiet competence and uncanny ability to spot details that others overlooked. While the doctors focused on obvious symptoms, low blood pressure, irregular heartbeat, and loss of consciousness, Maria noticed something different. Sarah's fingernails had a subtle blue tint that wasn't quite cyanosis. Her breathing pattern, while stable, showed slight irregularities that didn't match the preliminary diagnosis of cardiac episode or stroke. Most telling to Maria was the way Sarah's eyes moved beneath her closed lids, not the random movement of unconsciousness, but something more purposeful, as if she was trying to communicate even in her unresponsive state. "Doctor," Maria said quietly to Dr. Rodriguez, "I think we should consider—" "Not now, Maria," Dr. Rodriguez interrupted, focused on stabilizing Sarah's blood pressure. "Let's get the cardiac workup completed first." Michael paced in the family consultation room, his surgeon's mind racing through possibilities. Heart attack, stroke, aneurysm, seizure, each possibility terrified him more than any complex surgery he'd ever performed. When you operated on strangers, you could maintain clinical detachment, but this was Sarah, the woman who left encouraging notes in his lunch, who stayed up with him during his residency, who had transformed his orderly life into something beautiful and unpredictable. Dr. Rodriguez emerged from the treatment room with preliminary test results. "Michael, we've stabilized her for now. Initial cardiac enzymes are normal, and the EKG doesn't show signs of heart attack. We're running additional tests, but it could be neurological. We need to get her to imaging." Michael nodded, trying to process the information as both a doctor and a terrified husband. "Can I see her?" "Of course. Just remember, she needs to see your strength right now, not your fear." Walking into that treatment room was one of the hardest things Michael had ever done. Sarah lay still, connected to various machines that monitored every breath and heartbeat. Her usual vibrant complexion was replaced by a worrying pallor, and her hands that had graded hundreds of papers and comforted countless students, lay motionless at her sides. Michael took her hand, surprised by how cold it felt. "I'm here, sweetheart. The whole team is taking excellent care of you." He spoke softly, hoping somehow she could hear him, that his voice might anchor her to consciousness. As the evening wore on, test after test came back inconclusive. The CT scan showed no signs of stroke. Blood work revealed no obvious toxins or infections. Sarah remained stable but unresponsive, a medical puzzle that frustrated everyone involved. Michael's colleagues treated him with gentle professionalism, but he could see the concern in their eyes. By 10 p.m., the initial rush of emergency treatment had settled into careful monitoring. Sarah had been moved to the ICU, where the atmosphere was quieter but no less tense. Michael sat beside her bed, holding her hand and talking quietly about their plans, their memories, anything that might reach through whatever was keeping her unconscious. Maria Santos finished her shift in the emergency department, but something about Sarah's case bothered her enough that she decided to check on the patient before leaving. She found Michael alone with his wife, his usually confident demeanor replaced by raw vulnerability. "Dr. Harrison," she said softly, not wanting to intrude on the private moment. Michael looked up, recognizing Maria but not immediately placing her significance in Sarah's treatment. "Yes? I was part of the team that treated your wife earlier. I know the doctors are running more tests tomorrow, but there was something I noticed." She hesitated, knowing that questioning the diagnostic approach of senior physicians could be professionally risky. "Please," Michael said, desperation clear in his voice. "Anything you observed could be important." Maria moved closer to Sarah's bedside, her experienced eyes taking in details that others might miss. "Her symptoms don't quite fit the typical patterns we've been considering. The fingernail discoloration, the specific way her breathing changes, and look at her pupils when I shine this light." She demonstrated with a small penlight, and Michael leaned forward to observe. There was something unusual about Sarah's pupil response, not the dramatic changes that would indicate brain trauma, but subtle variations that suggested something else entirely. "What are you thinking?" Michael asked, his medical mind engaging despite his emotional state. "I think we might be looking at this wrong," Maria said carefully. "What if it's not cardiac or neurological? What if it's something environmental or toxic that's presenting in an unusual way?" Michael felt a spark of hope mixed with renewed fear. A toxic exposure could be treated if identified correctly, but time would be critical. "What kind of exposure?" "I'm not sure yet, but I think we need to dig deeper into her activities today, what she was exposed to at school, even what she ate or drank. Sometimes the answer is hiding in the details everyone assumes are irrelevant." As Maria spoke, Michael remembered something Sarah had mentioned briefly that morning. The school was having some kind of maintenance work done on the ventilation system. At the time, it had seemed like casual conversation, but now it took on potentially crucial significance. The school, he said suddenly. Sarah mentioned something about HVAC work being done. Could there be an air quality issue? Maria nodded thoughtfully. It's definitely worth investigating. Carbon monoxide, chemical cleaners, paint fumes, there are several possibilities that could cause these symptoms. For the first time since Sarah's collapse, Michael felt a glimmer of hope. If Maria was right, they might be dealing with something treatable rather than a devastating medical condition. But, first, they would need to convince the attending physicians to consider this alternative diagnosis and run the appropriate tests. As the night deepened, Michael remained at Sarah's bedside, but now he had a sense of purpose beyond helpless waiting. Maria's observations had opened a new avenue of investigation, and tomorrow would bring either answers or deeper mysteries. Sarah's breathing remained steady, her heart rate stable, but she showed no signs of awakening. Michael squeezed her hand gently, whispering, "Hold on, sweetheart. I think we might be onto something. That nurse might have saved your life tonight, and she doesn't even know it yet." Outside the ICU windows, Chicago's skyline glittered in the darkness, indifferent to the drama unfolding within the hospital walls. Michael had spent countless nights in these halls, but never as a family member watching helplessly as the woman he loved fought a battle he couldn't see or understand. The night stretched ahead, filled with uncertainty but now touched by hope. Maria Santos had seen something others missed, and her quiet observation might be the key to bringing Sarah back from whatever dark place had claimed her consciousness. Tomorrow would test whether medical instincts and careful attention to detail could triumph over mysterious symptoms and initial misdiagnosis. Dawn broke gray and cold over Chicago, but Michael Harrison had barely noticed the passing hours. He remained at Sarah's bedside in the ICU, dozing fitfully in the uncomfortable chair that had become his world. Every beep of the monitors jolted him awake, hoping for some sign that his wife was returning to consciousness. By 6 a.m., she remained unresponsive but stable, her condition neither improving nor deteriorating. Dr. Rodriguez arrived for his morning rounds, accompanied by Dr. Patricia Chen, the hospital's chief neurologist. Michael watched anxiously as they examined Sarah, checking her reflexes and reviewing the overnight monitoring data. Their expressions revealed professional concern but no breakthrough insights. "Michael," Dr. Rodriguez said gently, "we need to discuss next steps. The MRI we scheduled for this morning should give us more information about potential neurological causes. We're also consulting with toxicology to explore other possibilities." Michael nodded, remembering his conversation with Maria Santos the night before. "I think we should seriously consider environmental exposure. Sarah mentioned HVAC work at her school yesterday morning. The nurse who treated her initially noticed some unusual symptoms that might point to toxic exposure rather than cardiac or neurological issues." Dr. Chen looked interested but skeptical. "What kind of symptoms?" Before Michael could respond, Maria Santos appeared in the doorway. She had arrived early for her shift and wanted to follow up on her observations from the previous evening. "Excuse me, doctors. I'm Maria Santos, the nurse who initially assessed Mrs. Harrison. I wanted to share some additional thoughts about her presentation." Dr. Rodriguez gestured for her to continue, though his body language suggested polite tolerance rather than genuine interest. In the hospital hierarchy, nurses' diagnostic insights were often undervalued, especially when they contradicted physician assessments. Maria approached Sarah's bedside with confidence born from years of experience. "Look at her skin color in natural light," she said, opening the window blinds. "The pallor has a subtle yellow undertone that wasn't as visible under artificial lighting. Combined with the fingernail discoloration I noticed yesterday and the specific pattern of her breathing irregularities, I believe we're looking at carbon monoxide poisoning." Dr. Chen frowned. Carbon monoxide typically presents with headache, dizziness, and confusion before loss of consciousness. Mrs. Harrison went down suddenly, without warning signs. "Not necessarily," Maria replied respectfully but firmly. Acute exposure to high concentrations can cause rapid unconsciousness, especially if combined with other factors like stress or underlying health conditions. The cherry red skin color that textbooks describe actually occurs in severe cases or after death. In living patients with moderate poisoning, we often see exactly what Mrs. Harrison is displaying. Michael felt his heart racing with both hope and fear. Carbon monoxide poisoning was serious but treatable if caught in time. However, delayed diagnosis could result in permanent brain damage or death. "We need to test her carbon monoxide levels immediately," Michael said, his voice carrying both authority and desperation. Dr. Rodriguez nodded slowly. "Maria's right that we should explore this possibility. Let's get the blood gas analysis with CO oximetry stat." As the medical team rushed to order the appropriate tests, Michael felt a surge of gratitude toward Maria Santos. Her persistence and careful observation might have identified the key to saving Sarah's life. He watched as she continued to monitor Sarah's condition, noting subtle changes that others might miss. While waiting for test results, Michael called Oakwood Elementary School to speak with Principal Martinez about the HVAC work. The conversation revealed disturbing information that supported Maria's hypothesis. "Yes, we've been having problems with the heating system for weeks," Principal Martinez explained. "Yesterday morning, the maintenance crew was working on the main unit that serves the third grade wing. Actually, several staff members complained of headaches and dizziness throughout the day, but we attributed it to the stress of having construction noise during classes." Michael's blood ran cold. If multiple people had experienced symptoms, this confirmed the possibility of a building-wide air quality problem. Did anyone else become seriously ill? Not that I know of, but Sarah's classroom is directly above the mechanical room where they were working. She would have had the highest exposure if there was a problem with the system. Michael immediately shared this information with the medical team. Dr. Chen ordered testing for other potential toxins as well, but carbon monoxide remained the primary suspect. The waiting period for test results felt endless, each minute potentially critical for Sarah's long-term prognosis. Maria continued her assessment, documenting every detail of Sarah's condition. She noticed that Sarah's muscle tone was slightly different than typical unconscious patients, less flaccid, as if her body was fighting against the effects of whatever was affecting her system. "Dr. Harrison," Maria said quietly, "I know this is difficult, but can you tell me about your wife's routine yesterday morning? What time she left home, what she had for breakfast, anything that might be relevant." Michael appreciated that Maria was treating this like a detective case, gathering evidence to support the diagnosis. "She had coffee and toast around 7 a.m. She seemed fine, maybe a little tired, but she'd mentioned feeling dizzy the night before. She left for school around 7:45. What time do classes start at her school? 8:30. She always arrives early to prepare her classroom." Maria made mental calculations. If Sarah had been exposed to carbon monoxide starting around 8 a.m., and she collapsed around 2 p.m., that represented approximately 6 hours of exposure. The timeline supported the theory of gradual poisoning that culminated in acute symptoms. At 9:30 a.m., the blood test results arrived. Dr. Rodriguez reviewed them with growing concern before calling the team together. "Carbon monoxide level is 28%. That confirms acute poisoning." Michael felt simultaneously relieved and terrified. They had the diagnosis, but Sarah had been exposed for hours before receiving treatment. The medical team immediately began hyperbaric oxygen therapy to accelerate the elimination of carbon monoxide from her system. "The good news is we caught this before permanent damage occurred," Dr. Chen explained. However, recovery time varies significantly between patients. Some people wake up within hours of treatment, others take days. "We'll need to monitor her closely for neurological complications." Maria Santos felt a mixture of professional satisfaction and deep concern. Her instincts had been correct, but Sarah's recovery was still uncertain. She continued to observe her patient carefully, looking for any signs of improvement or complications. Meanwhile, Michael contacted the school district's safety department and the local fire department to report the carbon monoxide incident. An emergency inspection of Oakwood Elementary revealed a severely damaged heat exchanger that had been leaking deadly gas into the building for days. The school was immediately closed for repairs, and other exposed staff members were tested and monitored. As Sarah underwent hyperbaric oxygen treatment, Michael reflected on how close they had come to tragedy. If Maria hadn't questioned the initial diagnosis, if she hadn't noticed the subtle signs that others missed, Sarah might have suffered permanent brain damage or death from delayed treatment. The treatment process was lengthy and anxiety-inducing. Sarah remained unconscious as pure oxygen was administered under increased atmospheric pressure to force carbon monoxide out of her bloodstream. Michael sat nearby, watching monitors and praying for signs of improvement. During the afternoon, Maria checked on Sarah between her other patients. She had become personally invested in this case, having been the one to identify the correct diagnosis. As she reviewed Sarah's chart, she noticed subtle improvements in her vital signs that gave her hope. Her color is better, Maria told Michael during one of her visits. The oxygen saturation levels are improving, and her breathing pattern is more regular. These are good signs. Michael nodded gratefully. I can't thank you enough for seeing what everyone else missed. You may have saved her life. Maria smiled modestly. This is why we have teams. Sometimes it takes different perspectives to solve complex problems. I just happened to notice details that fit a pattern I'd seen before. As evening approached, the hyperbaric oxygen treatment continued, but Sarah still showed no signs of consciousness. Dr. Chen cautioned that recovery from severe carbon monoxide poisoning could be unpredictable, with some patients experiencing delayed neurological symptoms even after the poison was eliminated from their system. Michael spent another sleepless night at Sarah's bedside, but this time with hope rather than helpless desperation. They had identified the problem and were actively treating it. Maria Santos had provided the crucial insight that changed everything, proving that careful observation and willingness to question initial assumptions could mean the difference between life and death. The investigation into the school's HVAC system revealed gross negligence by the maintenance company, which had failed to properly inspect the heat exchanger before beginning work. Several other staff members showed elevated carbon monoxide levels, though none as severe as Sarah's. The incident would eventually result in significant legal action and policy changes, but Michael's focus remained entirely on his wife's recovery. Throughout the night, Maria continued to check on Sarah during her rounds, monitoring for any changes that might indicate improvement or complications. She had seen carbon monoxide cases before, but this one felt personal because of her role in the diagnosis and her connection to Dr. Harrison, whom she had observed from a distance during her years at the hospital. As dawn approached on the second day since Sarah's collapse, everyone waited anxiously for signs that the treatment was working. The carbon monoxide had been largely eliminated from her system, but the question remained whether her brain had suffered lasting damage during those critical hours before the correct treatment began. Maria Santos had become more than just a nurse in this case. She had become Sarah Harrison's advocate and the key to unlocking a medical mystery that could have ended in tragedy. Her quiet competence and attention to detail had challenged the assumptions of more senior physicians and ultimately saved a life. The morning would bring new developments, but, for now, Sarah continued to fight her way back from the brink of disaster, supported by cutting-edge medical treatment and the dedication of a nurse who refused to ignore the subtle signs that others had missed. The second morning brought a subtle but significant change that Maria Santos noticed immediately when she arrived for her shift. Sarah Harrison's eyelids were fluttering with more purposeful movement, and her breathing had developed a deeper, more natural rhythm. These were the kinds of details that experienced nurses learned to recognize, signs invisible to casual observation but meaningful to those who understood the language of recovery. Dr. Harrison, Maria said softly, finding Michael dozing in the chair beside his wife's bed. I think Sarah might be starting to come around. Michael jerked awake instantly, his eyes immediately focusing on Sarah's face. After 36 hours of watching for any sign of improvement, he had learned to hope carefully, but he could see what Maria meant. Sarah's face showed subtle expressions that suggested some level of consciousness returning. Dr. Chen arrived for morning rounds and was cautiously optimistic about the changes in Sarah's presentation. The hyperbaric oxygen therapy had successfully reduced her carbon monoxide levels to nearly normal, and her brain activity showed encouraging patterns on the EEG monitoring. "We're not out of the woods yet," Dr. Chen cautioned Michael. "Carbon monoxide poisoning can cause delayed neurological complications even days or weeks after exposure." However, the fact that she's showing signs of awakening this quickly is very promising. Throughout the morning, Sarah's movements became more pronounced. Her fingers twitched when Michael spoke to her, and her eyes tracked light and movement even though she remained unconscious. Maria documented every detail, creating a comprehensive record of Sarah's gradual return to awareness. Around noon, Sarah's eyes opened briefly. She looked confused and disoriented, her gaze unfocused and searching. Michael leaned forward, speaking softly to her. "Sarah, it's Michael. You're in the hospital, but you're safe. Can you hear me?" Sarah's eyes found his face, and, for a moment, there was clear recognition before she drifted back into unconsciousness. It was a brief interaction, but it represented a crucial milestone in her recovery. Maria observed this interaction with professional satisfaction and personal relief. She had seen too many cases where delayed diagnosis led to permanent damage or death. Sarah's response suggested that her cognitive functions were intact, at least at a basic level. Over the following hours, Sarah's periods of consciousness became longer and more frequent. She began to respond to simple commands, squeezing Michael's hand, following objects with her eyes, and showing facial expressions that indicated comprehension. Each improvement felt like a victory to everyone involved in her care. However, Sarah's recovery wasn't completely smooth. She experienced episodes of confusion and disorientation that Dr. Chen explained were common after severe carbon monoxide exposure. Sometimes she would wake up frightened and agitated, not remembering where she was or what had happened. Michael learned to speak calmly and repeatedly explained the situation until she relaxed. "The confusion is temporary," Dr. Chen assured Michael during one particularly difficult episode when Sarah became upset and tried to remove her oxygen mask. "Her brain is still healing from the toxic exposure. These symptoms should improve as the inflammation subsides." Maria developed a special rapport with Sarah during these confused periods. Her gentle manner and patient explanations seemed to help Sarah feel more secure. Maria would sit with her during difficult moments, explaining medical procedures and providing reassurance that helped reduce Sarah's anxiety. By the third day, Sarah was conscious for longer periods and beginning to remember fragments of what had happened. She recalled feeling increasingly dizzy and nauseous during her morning classes but attributed these symptoms to a possible flu. The last thing she remembered clearly was sitting at her desk during lunch break, trying to grade papers while fighting overwhelming fatigue. "I thought I was just tired," Sarah told Michael, her voice weak but clear. "The students seemed louder than usual, and I had such a headache. I remember thinking I should go to the school nurse, but then everything just went black." Michael felt a chill as he realized how close Sarah had come to permanent injury or death. If her collapse had happened at home alone instead of in a classroom full of students, she might not have received help in time to save her life. The investigation into the school's carbon monoxide leak had revealed shocking negligence. The maintenance company had been working on a damaged heat exchanger without proper safety equipment or gas detection devices. The leak had been building for days, creating dangerous conditions throughout the building. Sarah's classroom, located directly above the mechanical room, had received the highest concentration of the deadly gas. Principal Martinez visited Sarah in the hospital to apologize personally and explain the steps the school district was taking to prevent similar incidents. "We're implementing comprehensive safety protocols and requiring gas detection equipment during all HVAC work," she told Sarah. "This should never have happened, and we're grateful you're recovering." Sarah's response was characteristic of her generous nature. Despite nearly dying from the school's negligence, she was most concerned about her students and colleagues. "Are the children okay? Did anyone else get sick?" "Everyone else is fine," Principal Martinez assured her. "Several teachers had minor symptoms, but you were the only ones seriously affected because of your classroom's location." As Sarah's condition continued to improve, the medical team began planning her transition from intensive care to a regular hospital room. Maria Santos had been instrumental not only in the initial diagnosis but also in Sarah's ongoing recovery. Her attentive nursing care and ability to recognize subtle changes had contributed significantly to the positive outcome. Dr. Rodriguez, who had initially dismissed Maria's observations, made a point of acknowledging her contribution during a team meeting. This case demonstrates the importance of listening to all team members' insights. Maria's careful attention to details that others missed made the difference between a good outcome and a potential tragedy. Maria appreciated the recognition but remained focused on patient care rather than personal credit. She had seen too many cases where pride or hierarchy interfered with optimal treatment. Sarah's recovery validated her belief that every healthcare professional's observations had value, regardless of their position in the hospital hierarchy. As Sarah regained strength, she began to understand the crucial role Maria had played in saving her life. The nurse who had questioned the initial diagnosis when other medical professionals accepted it had literally been her lifeline to recovery. "I owe you everything," Sarah told Maria during one of her visits. "Michael told me how you noticed things others missed and kept pushing for the right diagnosis." Maria smiled warmly. "That's what we're here for. Medicine is a team effort, and sometimes the right answer comes from unexpected places. I'm just glad we figured it out in time." The friendship that developed between Sarah and Maria represented something special, a connection forged in crisis but sustained by mutual respect and gratitude. Sarah was a natural teacher, while Maria was a dedicated healer, and both women understood the value of careful attention to detail and persistent advocacy for others. Michael watched this friendship develop with deep appreciation for Maria's role in his wife's survival. As a surgeon, he was accustomed to being the primary decision-maker in medical situations, but this experience had taught him valuable lessons about teamwork and humility in healthcare. "You saved my wife's life," he told Maria privately. "I want you to know that your observation and persistence made all the difference. If you hadn't spoken up, we might have been looking at a very different outcome." Maria nodded thoughtfully. "This is why I love nursing. We get to see patients as complete human beings, not just collections of symptoms. Sometimes that perspective helps us notice things that might otherwise be overlooked." As Sarah's discharge date approached, the legal implications of her poisoning began to unfold. The maintenance company faced significant liability for their negligent work practices, and the school district was implementing comprehensive safety reforms. However, for Michael and Sarah, the focus remained on recovery and gratitude for the medical team that had saved her life. Sarah's neurological recovery continued to progress positively. The confusion and disorientation that had marked her early consciousness gradually resolved, and cognitive testing showed no signs of permanent damage. Dr. Chen was optimistic about her long-term prognosis. "Carbon monoxide poisoning can have delayed effects that appear weeks or months later," Dr. Chen explained during Sarah's final consultation. "However, your rapid response to treatment and complete neurological recovery suggest that you're unlikely to experience complications. We'll monitor you closely for the next few months, but I expect you'll make a full recovery." The experience had changed both Michael and Sarah's perspectives on life and medicine. Michael had learned valuable lessons about teamwork and the importance of listening to all members of the healthcare team. Sarah had gained a deep appreciation for the skilled professionals who had saved her life and a renewed sense of purpose in her own work as an educator. Maria Santos had become more than a nurse to the Harrison family. She was the person whose careful observation and brave advocacy had prevented a tragedy. Her willingness to question authority and persist in her convictions had demonstrated the critical importance of every healthcare professional's voice in patient care. As Sarah prepared to leave the hospital, she knew that her recovery was just beginning. The physical effects of carbon monoxide poisoning were resolving, but the emotional impact of nearly losing her life would take time to process. However, she also knew that she had been given a second chance, thanks largely to a nurse who refused to ignore the subtle signs that everyone else had missed. 3 weeks after Sarah Harrison's discharge from Chicago General Hospital, the Harrisons' home had become a place of gradual healing and profound reflection. Sarah moved carefully but steadily through her daily routines, still experiencing occasional fatigue and mild headaches that Dr. Chen assured her were normal parts of recovery from severe carbon monoxide poisoning. Michael had taken extended leave from his surgical practice to care for Sarah, a decision that surprised many of his colleagues who knew him as someone completely dedicated to his profession. However, nearly losing his wife had fundamentally changed his priorities and perspective on work-life balance. "I've performed thousands of surgeries," he told Dr. Walsh during a phone conversation about hospital matters, "but I've never experienced anything as terrifying as watching Sarah fight for her life and being completely unable to help her medically." The experience had taught him that expertise in one area didn't automatically translate to wisdom in all situations. Maria Santos, a nurse with no advanced degrees or prestigious titles, had possessed the insight and courage to save Sarah's life when he and other physicians had been looking in the wrong direction. Sarah's return to teaching had been postponed indefinitely. The school district insisted she take all the time necessary to recover fully, both physically and emotionally. Oakwood Elementary had undergone extensive safety renovations, including the installation of multiple carbon monoxide detection systems and new protocols for all maintenance work. Principal Martinez visited regularly to update Sarah on her students' progress and to check on her recovery. During one visit, she brought cards and drawings from Sarah's third-grade class, each child expressing their hope for their beloved teacher's quick return. "Mrs. Harrison, when are you coming back to teach us?" one card read in careful 8-year-old handwriting. "We miss your stories and your funny jokes. Tommy says you're a hero because you survived poison gas like a superhero." Sarah smiled through tears as she read the innocent words that captured the gravity of her experience in simple, childlike terms. She had indeed survived something that could have killed her, and, increasingly, she understood how miraculous her recovery had been. Maria Santos had become a regular visitor to the Harrison home, developing a friendship that transcended her professional relationship with the family. She brought insights from her nursing experience to help Sarah understand her recovery process and manage the psychological aspects of surviving a near-death experience. Many people who survive serious medical emergencies experience something like survivor's guilt, Maria explained during one of their conversations over tea. "You might find yourself wondering why you lived when others in similar situations don't make it. That's a normal reaction, but it's important to focus on moving forward positively." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "I do wonder about that sometimes. If I hadn't collapsed in a classroom full of children, if the ambulance had been delayed, if you hadn't noticed the details that led to the correct diagnosis, so many things had to go right for me to be sitting here today." "That's true," Maria agreed, "but those things did go right, and now you have an opportunity to make the most of this second chance. Many of my patients who survive serious emergencies find new purpose and meaning in their lives afterward." The legal proceedings against the maintenance company had been swift and decisive. The company's gross negligence in working on a damaged heat exchanger without proper safety measures had created life-threatening conditions that could have killed multiple people. Sarah's case became the centerpiece of a larger investigation into the company's safety practices across multiple job sites. Michael had initially wanted to pursue aggressive legal action, driven by anger over what had happened to Sarah and outrage at the preventable nature of her poisoning. However, Sarah's perspective was more measured and focused on systemic change rather than personal revenge. "I want to make sure this never happens to anyone else," she told their attorney. "The money won't change what happened to me, but requiring better safety protocols could save other people's lives." The settlement they eventually reached included significant financial compensation but, more importantly, mandated comprehensive safety training for the company's employees and required gas detection equipment at all job sites. The case became a model for improved workplace safety standards in the HVAC industry. Maria Santos received formal recognition from Chicago General Hospital for her role in diagnosing Sarah's carbon monoxide poisoning. During a staff meeting attended by physicians, nurses, and administrators, Dr. Rodriguez publicly acknowledged her contribution to the positive outcome. "This case demonstrates that excellent patient care comes from the entire healthcare team," he said. Maria's careful observation and willingness to question initial assumptions saved Mrs. Harrison's life and reminded all of us that valuable insights can come from any team member, regardless of their role or seniority. The recognition was meaningful to Maria, but what mattered more was the validation of her nursing philosophy. Throughout her career, she had believed that patient advocacy sometimes required challenging authority and persisting when others wanted to move on. Sarah's case proved that such persistence could literally mean the difference between life and death. The hospital used the case as a teaching example in their continuing education programs, emphasizing the importance of interdisciplinary collaboration and the value of questioning initial diagnoses when patient presentation doesn't fit expected patterns. Young medical students and nursing students learned from Maria's example about the critical importance of careful observation and advocacy. As autumn deepened into winter, Sarah's physical recovery continued to progress positively. Follow-up testing showed no signs of permanent neurological damage, and her energy levels were gradually returning to normal. However, the psychological impact of her near-death experience required more time and attention to process fully. Sarah began working with a counselor who specialized in helping people cope with medical trauma. She learned that survival guilt and anxiety about returning to normal activities were common among people who had experienced life-threatening emergencies. It's normal to feel anxious about returning to school, her counselor explained. Your brain is trying to protect you from similar dangers, even though the specific risk that harmed you has been eliminated. Recovery isn't just physical, it's also about rebuilding confidence and trust in your environment. Michael attended some of these counseling sessions, learning how to support Sarah's emotional recovery while managing his own anxiety about her safety. The experience had made him more protective but also more appreciative of their relationship and the life they had built together. During this time, the friendship between the Harrison family and Maria Santos deepened into something resembling family bonds. Maria's own background as a single mother raising two teenagers created natural connections with Sarah's nurturing personality and Michael's protective instincts. You've given us so much more than medical care, Sarah told Maria during one of their regular coffee visits. You've shown us what it means to truly advocate for someone, even when it's difficult or professionally risky. Maria appreciated the sentiment but remained humble about her role. Healthcare is about human connection as much as medical knowledge. When we see patients as complete people rather than just sets of symptoms, we're more likely to notice the details that matter. As Christmas approached, Sarah made the decision to return to teaching after the holiday break. The school district had completed all safety renovations, and Sarah felt mentally and physically prepared to resume her career. Her students and colleagues were eager to welcome her back. The experience had also influenced Michael's approach to his surgical practice. He began spending more time with patients and their families, recognizing that technical expertise needed to be balanced with human compassion and attention to the whole person rather than just the medical problem. Surgery will always be important to me, he told Sarah, but this experience has taught me that healing involves much more than just fixing physical problems. The way Maria cared for you, seeing you as a complete person and fighting for the right diagnosis, that's the kind of doctor I want to be. On New Year's Eve, the Harrisons hosted a small celebration that included Maria Santos and her children. It was a quiet gathering focused on gratitude and reflection rather than elaborate festivities. As midnight approached, they shared their hopes for the coming year and their appreciation for the unexpected gifts that had emerged from Sarah's near tragedy. A year ago, I thought I understood what was most important in life, Michael said during their informal toast. But nearly losing Sarah taught me that we often take for granted the people and experiences that give our lives meaning. Maria, you didn't just save Sarah's life, you reminded all of us what true dedication and courage look like. Maria raised her glass with characteristic modesty. Life gives us opportunities to help each other. I'm grateful that my training and experience allowed me to help Sarah when she needed it most. That's what we're all here for, to take care of each other when we're vulnerable. As the new year began, Sarah's full recovery seemed assured, but the lessons learned during her ordeal continued to influence everyone involved. The case had become a powerful example of how careful observation, persistent advocacy, and interdisciplinary collaboration could overcome initial misdiagnosis and save lives. Sarah returned to her third-grade classroom in January with renewed appreciation for her students and her profession. She had always been a dedicated teacher, but her experience had deepened her understanding of how precious and fragile life could be. Every day with her students felt like a gift. Maria Santos continued her work in the emergency department, but with enhanced confidence in her ability to make a difference. Sarah's case had validated her nursing philosophy and encouraged her to continue advocating for patients even when it meant challenging established medical hierarchies. The friendship that had developed among Sarah, Michael, and Maria became a lasting bond that enriched all their lives. They had been brought together by crisis but remained connected by mutual respect, gratitude, and shared understanding of how quickly life could change. Years later, when people asked Sarah about her recovery from carbon monoxide poisoning, she would always emphasize the role that Maria Santos had played in saving her life. "Doctors get most of the credit in medicine," she would say, "but sometimes it's the nurse who sees what everyone else misses. Maria didn't just treat my symptoms, she fought for the right diagnosis when others were ready to accept the wrong one. She literally gave me my life back." The experience had transformed a medical emergency into a story of human connection, professional courage, and the power of never giving up on finding the right answer, even when authority figures seemed certain they already knew what was wrong. It was a reminder that healing often comes from unexpected places and that the most important medical tool is sometimes simply the willingness to keep looking until the truth is found.